So in today's video, I will be making over these old windows. In a recent TikTok little verb, I saw this awesome mirrored glass window and tried to create my own. So in today's video, I will share the process with you on how I created these.
Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. It's Yvonne from Ginger Chick Rehab. I'm so glad to have you visiting, checking out what I am up to today. In today's video, oh my goodness, I love Crocs, I love rolling pins, and I also have an old window obsession. So part of my hoard of hoards is I have a lot of old windows. So I'm always looking for inspirations of what to do with them, something a little bit different. So I ran across somebody on TikTok, and I wish that I would have saved it, of how they were doing an antique mirror and some decoupage paper. So that is what today's video is all about. I kind of had to spend some time learning how to do an antiquing on glass to look like mirror. I've never done that before. So I did actually do like a lot of little researches and just figured out what technique works the best for me.
So here's 3 of the windows that I picked out of my hoard, and I won't even show you my hoard, or Chris will never let me buy another window again. Now, I would like to say we can just get started putting detail on these, but these are thrifted pieces. These are picked up off Marketplace, picked up off a Habitat. They're dirty, they're grungy. They absolutely need to be fixed and cleaned before I can do any decor look on them. So feel free if you want to fast forward to just the decor part, but I will touch on and show you my process of making over a old window to make sure that the glass is good, the paint is updated, and it's nice and clean for somebody to put on their wall. And though I have no magical powers to repair that glass, I can fix it and make sure that it is just an accent and that it's not sharp. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and get the vacuum out, the shop vac out, and just get some of this. These have probably all of these windows have been sitting in the hoard pile for a good year. And then if there's any hardware on these pieces, I'm going to go ahead and remove it. I won't be putting it back on. And then sometimes the easiest is just to go in and start sanding off. That is just buildup of weather, being out in the weather, what have you. So I'm just going to go in with some 220 sandpaper. Going to get anything that's chippy off that might fall off while I'm painting and just get these nice and cleaned up. And then as I'm sanding on this piece, I realized that it has some weather stripping on it. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that plastic weather stripping off of it. Definitely is not going to make it look like an old window if it has plastic on it. And now I said these have been sitting in my hoard for about a year, and this price tag shows it. So when it comes to this 3-paned window, our idea for this window is to have the slats not going vertically but going horizontally. So there's a lip on the bottom of this that I need to take off. I want to make it flat. So I'm just going to go with some 80 grit on my orbital sander and just go to town and just let the sandpaper take this wood down. And now that I've gotten them all sanded, anything removed, and vacuumed one more time to get all that sanding dust off, I'm going to go ahead and just with some super clean in a hot bucket of water and get all these wiped down. Now before giving these a fresh coat of paint on both sides, I'm going to go in and I'm going to tape off that window just using some Dollar General painter's tape. Luckily, there's not a ton of caulking that is missing, that glazing that keeps that window in. So I'm not going to get my glazing compound out. I'm just going to fill in any of those cracks just using a little of this Drydex spackle just to fill in any holes. So it's just a nice clean look. There's nothing, those windows are still in there. I just want to cover up those gaps. So now I'm going to go with my go-to, and usually when I'm painting windows, I do the basic white. So I'm just going in with the Kills paint and primer right off the shelf from Walmart and the flat white. And to give them that fresh look, I usually do 2 coats of paint. And nope, I'll admit to you, nope, I did not let that Drydex completely dry. I'm going to be painting over it anyway. That's just going to smooth it down and make it all blend in together. And it'll dry as the paint's drying. After my 2 coats of paint have dried on the one side, I'm going to go ahead and, what did they say? Work smarter, not harder. So before flipping it over and painting on the other side, I'm going to go ahead and sand this side down just using some 220 sandpaper. I'm just going to go in and distress those edges, anywhere that some of that bumpy paint was left. That's just going to give it that like aged look, but with a nice fresh paint job. Then again, before flipping that over, I'm going to go ahead and clean off that glass, getting any of that extra paint, any of the previous paint off also. And now that I've created some more dust and some more paint chips, time to suck that up. And then I'll go in with some Norwex cloths and clean that side of the glass. At least I got the most of it clean before flipping them over. And then I just have minimal of paint on the other side to do. But remember, they're always, even with old windows, there's got to be a problem child in the group. And the smaller of the window was natural on the one side. There was no sealant on it, no top coat on it whatsoever. So when I painted that first coat of white paint, yep, hello bleed through, hello yellow. So a couple coats of shellac to stop that bleed through, and a couple more coats of white to get it the white I was looking for. Are you wondering what my fix for? Or, like I said, I'm not a miracle worker. I cannot make a crack disappear, but I can fill in that crack using some of this thin Starbond glue and some of the accelerator to dry it. So the Starbond glue, when you buy the whole kit, has these little bitty tips that just help you just run a little bit of bead. I will say that you have to be quick with this thin stuff because it is very thin and it runs out very fast. But I do find that it goes in the middle of that crack. I can get that bump up. There's no sharpness to it. After I get the glue where I want it to be, I go in and spray it. I can scrape the excess off of the glass. I just really want to fill in that crack, that one that there's no sharp points for anybody. This is a beautiful 3-paned window, and I just really wanted to leave it as is. And I felt as the cracks are just character adders. You know, you don't always have to replace the glass. You don't always have to take away that character. And I'm going to be doing decor behind it, so it'll just kind of be hidden. That won't be your main focus. Okay guys, you made it this far. That's how I cleaned the windows, and now let's add some decor. And yes, I ordered some decoupage paper off of Etsy. Oh, let's see how these are going to look. So all 3 of these windows are going to be getting some type of a decoupage paper behind them. And of course, in a perfect world, my decoupage paper would be the same type, same size as my windows, but that's a perfect world. So I always manage, even if you've seen my dresser flips where I use some decoupage paper, I had to cut it down. So I just need to make the decision of where to make the cut on this decoupage paper. So, yep, I guess it's going to be right underneath this leafed wreath, just right above that. I don't want to get that patronized home because that would take some of that leaf. I want to leave that little bit left because, you know, I'm a crafter, so I don't throw anything away. I may be able to use this on a later project. So, hold my breath and make that cut. Does anybody else get nervous when you're like, oh, I have to cut pieces and parts? It makes me a little bit nervous, but you just have to make this decision, be committed, and go for it. So now that is just a much better fit. So now my next step is I have determined what my front side is going to be. So I'm lifting up that window, I'm putting that decoupage paper, I'm trying to get it centered to where I think that I want it to be. And then I'm going to take a dry erase marker and trace out the areas I want to emphasize, I want to keep. I don't want to put that mirror effect over, which is not only just the outer edge of the piece, but I want to do this rooster and a few of the major wordings I want in my mind. This is going to wipe off at the end. There's no biggie because it's on the opposite side, but that way when I'm doing the spray, I know where my detail areas, the areas that I want to be able to see through that mirror effect are. So now I can go ahead and set that decoupage paper so I don't actually get it sprayed off to the side until I'm ready for it again. And this is the outline that I have left. When I ran across this on TikTok, I knew that I still had in my hoard of hoards this mirror effect from where I tried to fix my mirror in my bathroom that we just redid. So this is a brand new can. So I already had that, and then I need some distilled vinegar, and then I need some water in a spray. It's a 50-50 ratio in a spray bottle. That's not a mister, a spray bottle. Now I just painted that window, so I want to keep my window all nice and clean, so I just taped all the area all the way down to the caulking. Now this, I've flipped this now over, and so what the directions, and like I said, I watched lots of tutorials on this, so I'm gonna wing it and just go for it and see if this is the technique that works for me. So I'm spraying the areas with the heavy spray of this distilled water mixture spray bottle. I'm testing my mirror effect off to the side first because I haven't used this can in a while. And then, yep, you just spray on top of what you just misted. So the tutorials I saw showed somebody dabbing off that excess water after it dried a little bit. You can kind of tell where it starts to dry, but that vinegar water will not dry. So they had paper towel or they had a old t-shirt. I don't have any old t-shirts laying around, so I first started off with the paper towel, but then I could see the square prints of the paper towel as I'm going around, and I'm like, I don't think I like that. It was, this is my first time. I'm sharing it with you all. So I quickly changed after I started really paying attention to what was going on over to just some plain Kleenexes that did not leave that square pattern. So I guess I didn't get video of me. Then I went back in, unfortunately, with a second coat I let that dry. I didn't want to mess. You don't want to, when something's wet, you just leave it wet and let it dry and then work with it after it is dry. So I finished just making an even pattern with that paper towel, but then I went in again with another coat and then dabbed it with the Kleenexes. I thought I had video of it, must not have hit the camera, but we have two more windows to go. So as that window is drying, I want to distress the edges of this sharped, just cut off with scissors, manufacturer's edge. I want it to make it look like it was worn. This is also going to thin those edges out so they're not sticking out so much. So I'm just taking my Black & Decker mouse sander, using the tip, just ever so slightly, letting that kind of age and tear the sides and distress the sides of this decoupage paper. So after my second effect, the mirror effect, was dry, I'm going in now and using some Mod Podge to put this decoupage paper on. So that's where I kind of can eyeball where my dry erase marker was on the other side. May not be perfectly perfect, but So I'm going to go ahead and start just Mod Podging just the one side down, making sure that I just get don't goop it on, just a nice thin coat. And luckily Mod Podge dries clear, so don't get nervous when you're like, oh, that's all cloudy and kind of mucky. It will dry clear. So I did remember the lady on TikTok just put her hand inside a Ziploc bag to help smooth this down. So I thought, so I'm like, hey, Chris, can you help me get a Ziploc bag onto my hand? I guess it's kind of awkward because I don't want the other piece falling down. I don't want it sliding into the mirror effect. So, I gave it a try. So now Chris has helped videoing here so you can get a little close up. You have just a thin layer of that Mod Podge and just gingerly laying it down. I don't mind a little creases in my decoupage paper. I think it gives that perfectly imperfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is a DIY. I want it to look old and aged, so that doesn't bother me in the least. But it was fun putting my hand in a Ziploc. And I could not help myself, but as soon as I got that Mod Podge on, flipping that piece over to see what it looked like. So, yep, I'm going to start wiping off that dry erase marker. So with all the tutorials I watched, I'm like, okay, so I know the back needs to be finished a little bit more because that is not something I want to resell. That's not something I want against somebody's back of the wall. And I know a lot of times the mirror effect needs to be spray painted with black to really give that mirror, but I didn't want to spray the decoupage paper. A lot of times when we're finishing off the back of a piece, be it a mirror, be it a window, I treat the back just as well. I want that to be just as pretty as the front. And we have this brown paper that we use to cover our workspaces, and you can buy it at the Dollar Tree also. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and tape this down, and I'm going to spray paint this brown paper sack paper black. I guess that'll help give that mirror effect a little bit more mirror effect, and it'll also make my backs look a little bit better. Then I'll also seal it in with a coat of the clear coat also. I don't want that black rubbing off. And then I'll just go ahead and I'll put it right on the back of that window. I'll kind of crease where I need to cut that excess of the paper off with my fingers, and then just go ahead and cut that as best as I can to size. And then after getting it cut to size, yep, I'm just going to go in with some more Mod Podge, and that's how I'm going to attach it to the back of this window. A lot of the steps for these next two windows are the same exact, so I'm just going to touch on the different decoupage paper that I'm going to use, how I'm cutting it down. So now this is that 3-paned window, and of course, yep, there again, the decoupage paper is too large. The hardware actually is way too large, but I'm going to make it work. So just have to make that commitment, that decision of where to make each cut. I need 3 different sections, and it's okay if I don't use all the pieces and parts that come with this decoupage paper. They're definitely not, they're very cost efficient at $5-6 comparative to a transfer. So I definitely love giving these decoupage papers a try from Etsy. So now I'm just working with cutting it down little by little, getting it in the placement that I think that I like, that's visually appealing to me. It's better to cut little by little than take too much off going, now how do I get that back together? But I'm going to be Mod Podging it so I can glue it back together. So I'm just kind of playing here. Then after I think I have it where I want, I put it underneath. That was a little bit of a difficult task because every time I put the window down, it kind of blew that bottom or the top pieces back off. But so same thing, just going around with that dry erase marker on the top of this, and just kind of giving me a guide for where I can spray that, spray the mirror effect on. So I definitely, even though I'm tracing around, I still want to see where my letters are going to be. And then this time, before spraying the mirror effect, I'm going to go in and distress my pieces of paper. That way I don't accidentally have any sanding dust that might be flying onto that wet paint. Now with this window, the wording's a little bit closer than that middle image. So there again, I taped off as much as I could. I didn't want to ruin that fresh paint job that I had. And I'm going to go in with that vinegar water mixture in the heavy spray bottle, and then just go in and try to, yeah, this is a little bit tighter than that bigger one. But I know this is my second time ever doing it, and I will go ahead and get better with time. But right now, I'm just going to go in and spray the window with the vinegar mixture. And then I'm going to go back in with that mirror effect and start to spray. Now, yes, this is way tighter of an area to spray on. So, like I said, this is my second time doing it. And so anything that I have fails or any tips as I'm working through these 3 windows, I will share with you as we're going through it. For me, I definitely recommend letting it dry a little bit. You can kind of tell where the wet mirror effect is and where the dry mirror effect is. I think you get a better look if you let that dry a little bit. That way you're not taking the paint off and you're just taking that vinegar water splatters off. And yes, I only use the Kleenexes on this one. Then you definitely just want to do a gentle dab. And I just got a box of Kleenexes, and when that Kleenex got too wet, I just got another dry one. Now I feel a second coat will give it a little bit more mirrory. Maybe I'm not doing it very heavy, but I rather go in a little gingerly than going in heavy. So I'm just going in with a second coat. And on this one, I just went ahead and sprayed it and then put the vinegar mixture. I saw it both ways on all the research that I did. So I probably should have done one of the panes at a time because the overspray really got onto my wording area and it was not as easy to get off. So, you know, second attempt ever doing this. We all learn as we're doing the process. If you can't learn from your mistakes, I don't know. That's how I learn. I just go for it and give it a try and see how it works. And I'm like, next time I'll do something a little bit on the different side. So right now I'm just trying to go back in and get it off my wording a little bit more. And I don't ever mind sharing my faults, my failures with you all. I think it's a sharing process and that's how we all learn. So I don't want you to think that, oh, she just did this and it was a perfect job and everything went right. Yeah, no, it's a DIY. Everything usually goes wrong and you just try to figure out how to fix this as you're going on. So now I'm doing the Mod Podge. I'm getting all those little strips that I cut, trying to eyeball. That's why it was nice putting my letters in there. I could really tell where I needed to put these pieces down. When it came to my H and my E of the hardware that was a little bit larger than what my area I had for it was, what I did is I made sure that you saw most of the H because you kind of needed to see the H. But the E, I felt as if you could tell what an E was, so I didn't mind taking a little bit more of that off. And then I did the exact same process where I sprayed another piece of the cardboard paper. I cut it down into strips to fit each one of these backings. I'm Mod Podging that on. And for this, I'm just taking that corner, just making sure my fingers give me a guide of something to cut off that excess. And then here, I'm just going to go ahead and take a spatula, a metal spatula, and a razor blade, X-Acto knife, just like I do when I do contact paper in a drawer. You know, you kind of just go along thinking, well, this could be easier. Oh, this could be easier. Sometimes you just change up your process and think, oh, well, maybe I should do it this way. So now for my third window, this is the decoupage paper. And I knew this decoupage paper is basically a 4-part decoupage paper. I believe that, yes, you could leave it as is, but it's probably more sold as to cut it up. So now I'm going to go with this middle one that does not have that green sack stripe on it, but I am going to use this bottom piece. I'm going to use that as my green sack stripes, but I'm not going to leave that big chunky, I don't think. This is where you go around and you play around. Do I like this? Do I like that? Make the decision. Finally made the decision that I'm like, oh, I'm going to cut up this red ticking on there to make it look like green sacks. And I think this is the look that I'm going to go for. And yep, I'm going to go in the same thing. I'm going to distress the edges of this, make it look tattered and torn. I definitely like how the edges of this, you don't really see that big chunky edge as much if you go through and distress it. But this is not as thick as a fabric and it's not as thin as a tissue paper. So you really have to go in gingerly. And then even as I'm making my final decision, I decided to set that off to the one side so you had a little bit more of the mirror. So there again, just tracing out what's underneath of that decoupage paper. And the decoupage paper ripped a little bit when I was doing the aging it with the sander. Yeah, that's okay. Just looks a little bit more aged to me. So now I'm going in with that same process. I find I like the spraying of the vinegar water first mixture and then spraying the mirror effect over that. Now, the one thing I was not afraid to go and do this time was go into those areas I did not want. I wanted to be able to see my decoupage paper. I wish I would have done that a little bit sooner on the second one that I did, but what is done is done. So, yep, it's just a process, and I'm glad that I'm doing 3 because I feel like I'm getting a little bit better as I go along. Did that immediately as soon as I got it finished, and then after it dried, I'm going back in with that Kleenex and I'm dabbing off all that excess vinegar water. Now, whether this will help me or not, I'm not really sure. I know I don't want to tape it down because you want that spray of that going over a little bit. You don't want it to be a crisp line. So I thought, well, here's this piece that's just laying in the burn pile to be thrown away. So I thought, at least I can do some of the edges, trying to get a little bit more on. This is my second. I like putting 2 second coats on. I find I get a little bit more coverage and I can kind of control it a little better. But yep, go ahead and spray it on, and then in those areas I don't, like I said, I can only do the edges a little bit with this, and then go ahead and go back in those areas I didn't want to have too much on. After getting my main image on with the decoupage paper, I'm going to go back in with that ticking striping now. I'm not going to have it overlap that first decoupage paper. I don't know if with it being Mod Podge if you'd see that, so I'm just going to have it going up to the paper itself. So when it came to that 3-paned window that I knew was cracked at the bottom, I kind of had the idea of putting a shelf below it. That way, if it bothered somebody, it's a beautiful 3-paned window, but what about a shelf? So I picked this hardware up at Hobby Lobby. Luckily, it was 50% off. Yeah, you know, those weekly sales. And so actually this other window has a lip also. So I'm like, this one's just crying for a shelf. I don't need any pretty wood, anything special. I want it to look raw and rough. So Chris is just using some leftover pallet wood that has the nail holes, but getting it a little bit softer so it's not so rough. So if you remember at the beginning, this is that window that I sawed that part that was raised up even, but when mounting the brackets, you want to make sure that you got them over the joint. That as you see, there's that line where the 2 pieces of wood, you don't want that shelf stressing that joint and pulling it away. So making sure that that bracket's over both of the pieces. After Chris getting both the pieces cut and sanded somewhat smoothly, you don't want them to be rough, I'm just going down in with that watered down antiquing wax mixture just to tie all the, you know, pallet wood tends to be a little bit on the dirty side, so just to tie all these pieces in with the old window, I think an old piece of wood would look perfect. Now we're going to go ahead and do a hanging system on these. If you don't hang something or put something on the shelf that's terribly heavy, it'll probably just work just fine. But I hope if the buyer realizes that they put something heavy and it keeps tipping, to either even it out or put a different hanger on it. But we're just going with these eyelet hangers along with the heavy gauged wire.
So, okay guys, what did you think of those windows? Oh my goodness. It was a little bit, you had to have patience, I will say that, and self-control, waiting for that mirror to dry a little bit before dabbing off that vinegar water. But oh my gosh, I just absolutely love how these turned out. They just elevated these windows to another level. I'm always happy to come across anything that helps inspire me to create something new. So I hope I have inspired you all, and I hope, give me a quick comment, is this something that you would try, or was it just fun watching? So thanks for watching today's video, guys, and as always, if you're new to our channel and you like this kind of content, please hit that subscription button along with the notification bell. And you guys, I will see you next time, and you can see what I'm up to. Bye.